away from me! Do you not have shame? A grown boy going from stall to stall, begging like a dog for food he did not sweat for.
Please, ma. I have not eaten since yesterday. Just small garri, that is all.
Small garri, he says. See this one. Somebody, come and hold this beggar before I pour this hot pepper soup on his head. Useless boy, nobody born you well. Roaming around this market, disturbing hard-working people. Get out of my front before I set my dog on you.
And she meant it. Before the boy could even lift himself up from where he had knelt in the dust, Mama Uju had already whistled, and her big brown dog came bounding out from behind her stall, barking, teeth showing, and the whole market erupted in laughter as the boy scrambled backward into the gutter, his one torn shirt catching on a nail and ripping clean down the back, right there in front of everyone. He did not even have the strength left to be embarrassed. He simply gathered himself, held his ripped shirt close with one trembling hand, and walked away with his head down, while the market laughed behind him like he was the day's entertainment. Nobody in that market knew what they were laughing at. Nobody knew that the boy they had just chased away with a dog and a torn shirt was the missing blood of their own king. And in exactly 11 days at the Yam Festival, the throne of that kingdom would either return to him or fall forever into the hands of a man who was already sharpening his knife for anyone who stood in his way. This is the story of Ikenna, the boy the world called nobody, and the birthmark that was about to turn an entire kingdom upside down. Some blessings walk around barefoot and hungry, and the people who could have knelt to them instead throw stones. Let me tell you how this one began. 15 years before that afternoon in the market, the kingdom of Umuoha was ruled by a good king named Obiora, a king the elders still spoke of with soft voices even now, because a king like that does not come twice in one lifetime. He had one son, one only son, a boy of 3 years old with fat cheeks and a laugh that could be heard across the whole palace courtyard. And on that boy's left shoulder, since the day he was born, sat a birthmark shaped exactly like a crescent moon, faint but unmistakable, the same mark that every true child of the Obiora bloodline had carried for 7 generations before him. It was not decoration, it was proof. In that kingdom, a birthmark like that could not be forged, could not be painted, could not be faked by anyone hungry for a throne that was not theirs. Then came the sickness. It swept through the palace in the rainy season like a thief in the night, taking the queen first and reaching for the young prince next. The old king, in his desperation, called his most trusted man, a palace guard named Anayo, and placed the boy in his arms. "Take him far from this place," the king said, his voice breaking. "Hide him until the sickness passes. Tell no one where you have gone. Guard him with your own life if you must." Anayo did exactly that. He carried the boy through the night, through farms and rivers and villages that did not know his face, running from a sickness that was chasing the whole palace like a hungry animal. But somewhere along that road, in a crowded, frightened market town where sick travelers were being turned away from every compound, Anayo himself began to burn with fever. And in the chaos of that town, in the pushing and the panic and the crying, the small boy's hand slipped out of his. 1 second he was there, the next the crowd had swallowed him whole, and no matter how he screamed the boy's name until his throat gave out, no matter how he searched every corner of that town for 3 days on legs that could barely carry him, the child was gone, vanished into a kingdom that did not know it was losing its own future. When the sickness finally passed and Anayo dragged himself back to the palace to confess what had happened, King Obiora did not kill him, though every soldier in that courtyard expected it. The old king simply sat down, put his face in his 2 hands, and wept for a length of time nobody dared to measure. And then he lifted his head and said the words that would carry Anayo for the next 15 years of his life. "You will not rest, Anayo. Not one full night, until you bring back proof of my son, alive or in the ground, I do not care which. But you will search until your legs can no longer carry you, and even then you will crawl." So Anayo searched. 15 years he searched. He grew old on the road searching. His hair went grey searching. He walked through markets he could no longer count, looked at the shoulders of 1,000 boys who were not his prince, and slept in more strange villages than a man should be allowed to sleep in one lifetime. And through all of it, he never once stopped believing that somewhere, in some corner of that same wide earth, the crescent moon was still sitting on a shoulder waiting for someone to look. Now hear me. because the years had not been kind to the kingdom either. King Obioma had grown old and frail, his breath now thinner than smoke, and the healers had already told the council in whispers that he did not have many more rainy seasons left in him. By the old law of that land, a king who dies without a confirmed blood heir hands his throne on the day of the next yam festival to the nearest living male relative. And the nearest living male relative was a man named Obiora, the king's own cousin's son, a man whose smile could charm a whole village and whose heart underneath that smile was already counting the soldiers he would need to keep that throne once it landed in his hands. Obiora was not a patient man. When word reached him, as word always reaches men like him, that old Anayo was still combing every market town within riding distance, searching for a boy with a crescent moon on his shoulder, Obiora did not laugh it off. He sent his own men out too, quietly, not to find the prince and return him home, but to find the prince first and make sure he never got the chance to be found by anyone else. A missing prince was dangerous only if he stayed missing. A found prince, walking, breathing with proof on his skin, was Obiora's worst nightmare. So there they were, a dying king counting his final days, a desperate old guard searching every face in every market with time running out beneath him, a hungry cousin with soldiers combing the same roads for the opposite reason, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, completely unaware that any of it existed, a hungry boy named Ikenna was simply trying to survive one more day. Ikenna did not know his own beginning. He had grown up passed from one distant relative to another after being found wandering as a small, feverish child near a market town many years ago. A woman who took pity on him for a season, then an uncle who grew tired of feeding a mouth that was not his blood, then another house, then another, until by the time he was 17 years old, there was no house left that wanted him, and the road itself became his only family. He begged where he had to. He worked where anyone would let him carry, sweep, fetch water, split wood, for whatever small coins or leftover food they were willing to throw his way. He slept most nights under the eaves of the market stalls, using his own arm as a pillow. But here is the part you must understand about Ikenna, because it is the whole heart of this story. Hunger had not made him hard. He could have become bitter. He could have become a thief, a liar, a boy with sharp elbows and a sharper mouth, because the world had certainly given him enough reason to become exactly that kind of person. Instead, Ikenna remained soft in the one place it mattered most, his heart. If he found 2 pieces of bread, he gave one away before he had even finished chewing the first. If an old woman needed her firewood carried up a hill she could no longer climb, Ikenna carried it, even on the days his own stomach was screaming louder than her request. He used to say to himself, in the quiet hours when nobody was listening, a man can lose his shirt, his shelter, his last coin. Let him not lose his kindness too. That is the one thing hunger has no right to take. There was only one soul in that market who ever showed Ikenna any real gentleness in return. A young trader's daughter named Adaise, who sold cooked corn and boiled groundnuts at her mother's store. Every few days, when her mother was not watching too closely, Adaise would wrap a few extra pieces of corn in a leaf and slip them quietly into Ikenna's hand, never making a show of it, never expecting thanks. "Eat," she would whisper, "before somebody sees." The other traders mocked her for it. "Why are you feeding that useless beggar boy? You will spoil him. He will start expecting it every day." Adaise would simply shrug and say, "Today it is corn. Tomorrow only God knows what any of us will need. I am not losing anything by being kind." Adaise did not know it yet, but that small kindness, given quietly and expecting nothing, was about to be repaid in a way she could not have imagined in her wildest dreams. Now we return to that same hot, ordinary afternoon. The day had started like any other for Ikenna. His stomach aching, the sun already merciless by mid-morning, his legs weak from 2 days of eating almost nothing. He had gone from stall to stall, as he sometimes did on his worst days, asking quietly, humbly, if anyone had leftover food, a torn bag of gari, anything at all. Most people ignored him. A few cursed him under their breath. And then he reached Mama Uju's stall, the loudest, proudest trader in that whole market, a woman famous for her pepper soup and even more famous for her temper. And you already know what happened there. The insults, the dog, the torn shirt, the whole market laughing at a hungry boy in the dust. What nobody in that market knew, what not even Ikenna himself knew, was that an old man had entered that same market not 20 minutes earlier, walking slowly on a carved wooden stick, his eyes tired but still searching, still scanning every young man's shoulders the way he had scanned 10,000 shoulders across 15 long years. His name, of course, was Anayo, and that particular day was not just any day for him. That particular day was the last day of his search. He had received word from the palace that morning that the king's breathing had grown dangerously shallow overnight, and that the healers no longer believed he would see the Yam festival, only 11 days away, and that if the true prince was not found and brought home before that festival, the throne would pass by law to Obiora, and Anayo's 15 years of searching, his whole life's mission, would end in nothing. He had promised himself that morning, standing at the edge of that market town, that this would be his final search before he turned back towards the palace to deliver the answer no father should ever have to hear. So, when the commotion broke out near Mama Uju's stall, when the barking and the laughter drew his tired old eyes across the market, Anayo almost did not bother to look. He had seen 100 market humiliations over the years, and none of them ever mattered. But some old instinct sharpened by 15 years of disappointment made him turn his head anyway. And there, as the boy scrambled backward and his torn shirt fell open across his shoulder, Anayo saw it. A pale crescent moon, faint against the boy's skin, sitting exactly where it had sat on a laughing 3-year-old boy 15 years earlier, in the exact same spot, the exact same shape, as though God himself had carved it there with his own finger and refused to let time erase it. Anayo's walking stick fell out of his hand and clattered onto the ground. He did not even notice. His legs, tired from 15 years of roads, somehow found the strength to run, actually run, through that crowded market, pushing past traders and baskets and children until he reached the boy still crouched in the dust, trying to hold his torn shirt together with one shaking hand. "Your shoulder," Anayo said, his voice cracking, his old hands already reaching for the boy's torn collar before he could even think to ask permission. "Your shoulder. Please, please, my son, let me see your shoulder." Ikenna flinched backward, confused, frightened, certain this strange old man wanted to hurt him too. "Sir, please, I have done nothing. I was only asking for food. I am not here to harm you," Anayo said, tears now running freely down a face that had not cried in years. "I have been looking for you since you could remember your own name. Please, my son, your shoulder." Something in the old man's voice, something so broken and so desperate and so far from cruelty, made Ikenna stop resisting. He let the torn shirt fall from his shoulder completely, and the whole market, which had gathered again to watch this new strange spectacle, went silent as Anayo fell to his knees in the dust in front of a beggar boy and pressed his forehead against that small crescent moon, weeping like a man who had just been handed his own life back after 15 years of believing it was gone forever. "It is him," Anayo whispered over and over to no one and to everyone. "It is him. It is truly him. My king, my king. We found him. We found him." Mama Uju, who only moments earlier had set her dog on this same boy and threatened to pour hot soup on his head, went pale as ash. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The traders who had laughed loudest were the first to go quiet. If you have ever watched someone humiliate a person in front of a whole crowd, only to find out minutes later exactly who that person was, drop the words "I have seen this" in the comments below. Because somewhere out there, somebody just remembered a moment exactly like this one from their own life. Let us know how many of you have witnessed pride meet its match. Now, let us continue, because this story is far from finished. Ikenna could not speak for a long moment. His whole body was shaking, not from fear now, but from something he had no name for, a feeling too large for a boy who grew up believing he belonged to nobody. "Who am I?" he finally managed to whisper. "What are you saying? I am nobody. I have always been nobody." "You are the son of King Eze Obioma," Anayo said, gripping the boy's shoulders as though he might vanish again if he let go for even a second. You were lost to me on a road 15 years ago, and I have searched every market between here and the Great River looking for this mark. Your father is alive, but barely, and if we don't reach the palace before the Yam Festival, 11 days from now, everything you were born to inherit will be stolen by a man who has already sent soldiers out looking for you, not to bring you home, but to make sure you never arrive. The market gasped as one. Mama Uju's dog, sensing something had shifted in the air, whimpered and slunk behind her stall.
But here is where the real danger began, because word travels faster than truth ever can in a place like that market. And by the time Anayo had helped Ikenna to his feet and begun leading him toward the edge of town to find horses for the long ride home, whispers were already racing ahead of them, like fire through dry grass. Somebody had seen a beggar boy, revealed as the lost prince. Somebody had told a passing trader. That trader had told a merchant heading toward the capital. And that merchant, without knowing it, delivered that whisper directly into the ears of one of Obiora's own hired men, resting at a roadside inn exactly 2 villages away. By nightfall, Obiora knew. And Obiora, sipping palm wine in his compound with the calm face of a man who had already decided what needed to be done, called 4 of his most loyal, most ruthless men to his side. There is a boy, he said quietly, wearing my birthright on his shoulder like it belongs to him. He must not reach the palace alive. You have until the festival. Do not fail me. So now, hear me, because the clock was no longer just 11 days ticking toward a coronation. It was 11 days ticking toward either a crowning or a killing, and both sides of that race were now moving. Anayo, wise from 15 years on dangerous roads, did not travel the main path back to the palace. He kept Ikenna moving at night, resting in the day inside the homes of villagers he trusted from his long years of searching, changing their route whenever a stranger's face looked at them 1 second too long. Ikenna, who had spent his whole life running from hunger, now found himself running from something far frightening. Men who wanted him dead, simply for being born the person he was. Twice on that journey, Obiora's men came close enough to hear their horses on the road behind them, and twice Anayo pulled the boy off the path and into the bush, holding a hand over his own to keep his breathing quiet, praying to every ancestor he had ever known that the horses would pass without turning their heads. On the 9th night, with only 2 days left before the festival, they were finally cornered. 3 of Obiora's men found them behind an abandoned barn, blades already drawn, moonlight catching the metal. Anayo, old and unarmed, stepped in front of the boy without a moment's hesitation. You will have to go through me first, he said, his voice steady despite his shaking knees. And even then, this boy's blood is not yours to spill. It belongs to a kingdom that has been waiting 15 years to see it home safely. It was of all people, a group of village hunters returning late from a night trap line who heard the commotion and came running with their own machetes raised, scattering Obiora's men into the darkness before a single drop of blood could be spilled. Ikenna and Anayo did not stop moving again until the palace gate finally rose in front of them on the morning of the festival itself, with barely hours to spare. Inside those gates, King Obioma lay on a mat by the window, his breath thin as thread, his eyes half closed, already being told softly by his healers to prepare his heart for the journey every man must eventually take. When Anayo burst into that room, dust-covered, exhausted, dragging a thin, ragged, barefoot boy behind him, the guards nearly threw them both out before the old king's eyes suddenly opened fully for the first time in days. Anayo, the king whispered, his voice a ghost of what it once was. Can this be? Anayo could not speak. He simply pulled back the boy's torn shirt one final time and revealed the crescent moon to the only man in the world who had been waiting 15 years to see it again.
The old king began to cry, silently at first, and then without any shame at all, reaching out a trembling hand toward the son he had placed into another man's arms as a laughing 3-year-old and never touched again until this very moment. "My son," he whispered over and over, pressing that thin hand against the boy's face like he was memorizing him all over again. My son has come home to me." If you believe that no matter how long a road is, no matter how many years pass, what truly belongs to you will always find its way back into your hands, hit the like button right now on this video and share it with somebody who needs to remember that today. Somebody out there has been walking their own long road for 15 years too, and they need this reminder. There was no time to waste. With the sun already climbing toward its highest point on the Yam Festival crowds, gathering in the courtyard below, expecting a coronation that everyone believed would crown Obiora, the council was called urgently. Obiora arrived dressed in his finest, already wearing the confident smile of a man certain the throne was already his, only to find the old king sitting upright, weak but alive, with a dust-covered barefoot boy standing beside him and Anayo presenting the birthmark before the entire council of elders for every eye in that room to witness with their own 2 eyes. Obiora's smile did not survive that moment. He tried briefly, desperately, to argue that the mark could be forged, that the boy was an imposter, that this was some trick arranged by a dying king unwilling to let go of his throne. But 3 of the eldest chiefs in that council had personally held the young prince as a baby, had seen that exact mark themselves years before the sickness ever came, and when they examined Ikenna's shoulder, they confirmed it without a shadow of doubt in their voices. Obiora, cornered, his soldiers already known to have been hunting a boy on the open road, an act no innocent man would ever have ordered, was stripped of his place in the succession that very afternoon and escorted out of the palace under guard, his ambitions ending exactly where his cruelty had begun. And so, as the sun began to lower over the Yam Festival that very evening, a boy who had been chased away from a market stall with a dog and a torn shirt 11 days earlier stood in the palace courtyard, bathed, dressed in royal cloth for the first time in his life, and was formally named before the entire kingdom as Prince Ikenna, true blood of Ezi Obioma, heir to the throne. The same crowd that had never once looked twice at a hungry beggar now knelt before him in the dust, the very same dust he had once begged for scraps in.
Ikenna's first act as prince, before he had even eaten a proper meal in his new home, was to send for one person from that market town. Not Mama Uju, not the traders who had laughed the loudest. He sent for Ada, the trader's daughter, who had quietly slipped him corn wrapped in leaves without ever once expecting anything back. When she arrived at the palace, trembling, certain she had done something wrong, Ikenna simply smiled at her, the way he used to smile when she pressed food into his hand and whispered, "Eat before somebody sees." "You fed me when you believed I had nothing to offer you in return," he told her in front of the whole gathered council. "Now let the kingdom feed you for the rest of your life." He granted her family land, a proper market store built with strong wood and a roof that would never leak, and a standing invitation to the palace whenever she wished it, not out of debt, but out of a friendship neither of them ever expected to find. As for Mama Uju, Ikenna did not send soldiers to punish her, and he did not banish her from the market either, though every elder in that council expected him to. Instead, he sent word that she was to appear before him, and when she arrived, shaking, certain her life was about to end, the young prince looked at her for a long, quiet moment and said only this: "You did not know who I was that day, and that is exactly the lesson I want you to carry for the rest of your life. Because you will never know, truly, who is standing in front of you asking for kindness. A beggar, a stranger, a forgotten face in the dust.
treat them all as though they might be exactly who I was that day. That is the only punishment I will give you. Live with what you did and let it change how you treat every hungry soul who ever stands before your stall again. Mama Uju left that palace in tears, not from fear, but from a shame that would follow her for the rest of her days, a shame far heavier than any prison sentence could have been. King Eze Obioma lived just long enough to see his son properly crowned 3 months later in a ceremony the whole kingdom still speaks about, before finally closing his eyes for the last time in peace. His greatest fear, dying without ever finding his blood, erased forever. Prince Ikenna, now king, ruled with the same soft heart hunger had never managed to destroy in him, remembered always in every decision he made what it felt like to be looked at and dismissed as nothing, and he made certain that no beggar, no stranger, no forgotten face was ever chased away from his gates the way he once was chased away from a market stall with a dog at his heels. And that, my dear friend, watching this right now, is the story of the beggar who was actually the king's lost son. Never look at the hungry stranger in front of you and decide in your own small mind that you already know their whole worth. You do not know whose son is standing in your doorway. You do not know whose blessing you are one unkind word away from chasing off forever. If this story moved you even a little, do one thing for me before you go. Tap that subscribe button and join our growing family here on Iseda's African Tales, because we are building something beautiful together, one story at a time, and I want you standing right here with us for the next one. Now tell me, honestly, in the comments below, if you were Mama Uju in that moment, kneeling before the boy you once mocked, what would you have said to him? I want to read every single answer, so do not be shy. And while you are down there, tell me where in the world you are watching this story from, your city, your country, because I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Until the next story, remember, never judge the dust on somebody's feet before you have asked what road they have been walking. You truly never know who is standing in front of you. The end.